Russia's invasion of Ukraine has changed the whole world politics. The most interesting part of this war was what the Chechens did. Chechen soldiers are completely changing the course of the war. Ukraine kills pro-Russian Chechen battalion and Tokmak Ukraine. Chechen soldiers in the Ukrainian army are advancing on several fronts. According to reports in the Russian press, Putin's enemy Chechen commander was spotted in Ukraine after the Chechen legendary commander was spotted in Ukraine. The Kremlin is in a panic. It is thought that as a result of this incident, all Chechens living in Russia will start to support Ukraine more. Russia is very worried that the Chechen commander is in Ukraine. So what are Chechens actually doing? Let's analyze this special topic together. Chechens are the most interesting group in this war because there are thousands of Chechen soldiers in both the Russian army and the Ukrainian army. This division among Chechen soldiers is actually quite simple. But to understand it, we need to analyze the background of the relationship between Chechens and Russia. There are 22 republics within the Russian Federation. Although they are autonomous in many respects, they are actually struggling with Russia's assimilation policies and repression. Chechnya is one of the autonomous republics in Russia. Russia has implemented very harsh assimilation policies against all minorities in the country. Chechens have been fighting for independence from Russia since 1994. The Russian government raided Chechen places of worship and banned them from using their own language. As a result of Russia's oppression, Chechens started to rebel. In 1994, the Russian army suffered a huge defeat in the rebellion. Chechen rebels inflicted a lot of damage on the Russian army. This conflict continued until 2017. After heavy pressure from Russia, many Chechen rebels sought refuge in other Muslim countries. Putin decided to cooperate with Kadyrov, who was among the Chechens. Kadyrov was always loyal to Putin and made Chechens fight for Russia. This led to the emigration of rebel commanders from Chechnya to Ukraine. Chechens have always hated Putin and Russia. When Putin decided to invade Ukraine, a very important development took place. Putin made a deal with the Chechen leader, Kadyrov. It was announced that Chechens living in Russia would fight against Ukraine. However, thousands of Chechen volunteers joined the Ukrainian army. As a result of the successful operation organized by the Ukrainian army, the pro-Russian Chechen unit in Zaporizhia Oblast was killed. Pro-Russian troops failed to respond to the midnight missile strike. Ukrainian army missiles destroyed a military base housing Chechen fighters. Most of the Chechen fighters on the base were killed. After this operation, Russia's power in Tokmak and Zaporizhia Oblast were greatly reduced. The Ukrainian army carried out very important operations in the region. Chechens in the Ukrainian army formed a unit called Sheikh Mansur Battalion. The leader of the Sheikh Mansur Battalion group, Muslim Chabala, said that they did not consider Ramzan Kadyrov soldiers fighting on the side of Russia as Chechens. Muslim Kabalov's statements made a strong impression on all Chechens. Chabala said that they joined the Ukrainian army to take revenge on Russia. These statements mobilized Chechens who took refuge in different countries around the world. Thousands of Chechens decided to go to Ukraine to fight against Russia again, especially thousands of Chechens who were in Syria went to Ukraine. One of them was very important. Abdul Hakim al-Shishani, a Chechen commander who fought against Russian troops in Syria, made a statement and left for Ukraine. Shishani said the following: "We are going to Ukraine to fight the Russians who killed our people in the 1990s and committed the most heinous crimes against them. Russia continues to use violence against anyone who is hostile to it. Kadyrov, who is a Russian agent, is helping for many years." Abdul Hakim al-Shishani led the Chechens in their fight against Russia under Kishin's leadership. Chechen rebels devastated the Russian army for years. Shishani was Putin's worst fear. Now that Shishani is going to Ukraine with all his troops, Putin is scared again. Shishani army is expected to fight hard against the Russian troops, according to Ukrainian media reports. The Chechen commander is currently fighting a terrific battle against Russian troops in the Bakhmut region. Abdul Hakim al-Shishani is considered a hero by anti-Putin opponents in Russia. He is fighting with the Ukrainian army against Russia as a symbolic significance. Thousands of Chechens living in Chechnya have started to react even more against Kadyrov after Kishin's statements. The Chechen people now think that Kadyrov is a collaborator and even an agent of Putin. The political career of Kadyrov, the oppressive Chechen leader, is almost over. This is causing many problems in Russia. Kadyrov is pressuring Putin to give him more support. However, Kadyrov's influence on Putin's borders, Russian nationalists, allied Russian nationalists think that Chechens should never have a say in the governance of Russia. The relationship between Kadyrov and Putin is very disturbing for nationalists in Russia. On the other hand, Ukraine's President Zelensky is making good use of this tension. Zelensky has addressed Chechens and Muslims living in Russia in these statements. The Ukrainian president recalled Putin's repression of minorities in Russia. Putin's opponents and minorities showed great interest in these statements. About 7% of Russia's population is Muslim. The opposition of the country's Muslims to Putin has greatly diminished the political power of the Russian president. A video of a Chechen commander in Bakhmut praying has been shared thousands of times on Russian Telegram channels. This commander, reportedly named Idris, has also caused a lot of damage to Russia over the years. The Russian government plans to offer a reward of $500 million for his killing. Its racist speech to his soldiers was quite impressive. On the other hand, Chechen soldiers think that Russia must be stopped in Ukraine because if Russia loses this war, it will have to give up its occupation policies. The assimilated peoples in Russia will fight for freedom and Russia will completely disintegrate. That's why Chechen soldiers think that the war in Ukraine is very important for Chechen independence. Chechen commanders are also appealing to Western countries in this regard. Chechen fighters emphasize the need for more Western aid for Ukraine because if Russia succeeds in invading Ukraine, it can also attack other countries in Europe. Chechens believe that Russia must be stopped as soon as possible for the security of the whole world. For this, Western countries are expected to send more aid to Ukraine. Chechen fighters are completely changing the course of this war. Chechens have become Putin's nightmare. The Russian army is suffering heavy losses against the Chechen fighters. The Russian army doesn't have the strength to fight against the Chechens. The Ukrainian government has put a $1 million reward on the head of convicted General Sergei Surovikin, with the joint decision taken by the US and the Ukrainian government. The person who manages to capture Russian General Sergei Surovikin alive will be rewarded $1 million. Surovikin, who was previously dismissed for war crimes committed on Ukrainian territory, had become the target of US officials. Russian leader Vladimir Putin had to dismiss Surovikin due to the crimes committed by Sergei Surovikin in Ukraine. Now a major effort has been launched to capture Surovikin. Sergei Surovikin, who was appointed by Vladimir Putin after the Russian army started to lose the war in Ukrainian territory in the past months, started attacking residential areas in Ukrainian territory from the first moment he took office. Surovikin, known as a general with a criminal record, has committed many war crimes with the soldiers under his command while serving in Syria. Due to his war crimes in Syria, the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for Sergei Surovikin's arrest. However, Surovikin's crimes could not be proven and the case was dropped after the Russian army invaded Ukrainian territory. The Russian generals were weakened and the soldiers under his command were recalled to Russian territory by Putin's order. With Surovikin's return to Russia, Russian General Alexander Lapin, who was the commander of the Russian army, was dismissed by Putin and Sergei Surovikin was appointed. Sergei Sorokin, who had just taken office, organized successive airstrikes on Ukrainian territory in order to increase the enthusiasm of Russian soldiers. Again, Surovikin also sent Russian troops under his command to Ukrainian territory and specially assigned these soldiers. The main task of these soldiers was to attack residential areas on Ukrainian territory with unmanned warplanes and to instill fear and panic in Ukrainian citizens living there. In this way, Ukrainian citizens would leave these areas and the Russian army's job would become easier. After a while, however, things got out of control and the soldiers under Surovikin's command started loading Ukrainian territory. Russian soldiers broke into houses abandoned by Ukrainian citizens, stole valuables, and returned to Russia to sell them. However, Surovikin's recent order to attack the city of Dnipro drew global outrage. The attack with long-range Iskander missiles damaged many buildings and vehicles in the Dnipro. In response, the US and Ukrainian authorities took action to have Sergei Surovikin charged and arrested by the International Criminal Court. Realizing that Sorokin would be arrested, Putin made a sudden decision to dismiss Sorokin and appointed Russian General Valery Gerasimov. Now U.S. officials are after Surovikin again and announced that $1 million reward will be given to the soldier or person who captures General Sergei Surovikin. Here are the details of the news. Upon the joint decision of the U.S. and Ukrainian government, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky issued a declaration in his parliamentary speech. In this statement, the name of the long-lost Russian General Sergei Surovikin was also mentioned. Surovikin's sudden disappearance while a trial for war crimes committed in Ukraine was still ongoing angered Ukrainian officials. Zelensky, who also specifically addressed pro-Ukrainian and Russian citizens living in Russia, stated that the person who delivered Sergei Surovikin alive will be rewarded with $1 million. After Zelensky's statement, a search warrant was issued for Sergei Surovikin under the leadership of the USA. Surovikin, who has not been seen for a long time, is thought to be hiding by Putin. If Sorokin is caught and confesses, both Vladimir Putin and Russia could face a huge compensation lawsuit. For this reason, it is very important that we can scout and make the talk after this incident. Russian leader Vladimir Putin issued a decree that soldiers who loaded on Ukrainian territory will be tried with imprisonment. Thus, Russian soldiers caught loading would be taken back to Russia and sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. However, looking at the videos and images shared on Telegram channels, it is clear that Russian soldiers continue to loot. It seems that Putin has made this decision only to prevent the US and Western countries from putting pressure on him. Many allegations have been made about General Sergei Surovikin. One of these allegations was that Sorokin was going to stage a coup. Many people say that Surovikin was dismissed by Putin because he intended to stage a coup. In fact, Sorokin's rapid rise to power and his complete command of the Russian army was a major threat to Vladimir Putin. At that time, the Russian people were very angry against Vladimir Putin. The Russian economy was going through a very difficult period due to the sanctions imposed on Russia by the US and Western countries and the high cost of the Russian army. Protests started to be organized in many cities in Russia. A large number of people were protesting for the end of the Putin regime and the end of the war in Ukraine. These protests could have shaken Putin's authority. It became quite easy for a suddenly emerging name to stage a coup because the Russian people's patience was exhausted and they were very angry. It was claimed that Sergei Surovikin was the person who would carry out the scoop after Vladimir Putin transferred all the powers over the army to Surovikin. Surovikin established a great dominance over the Russian army. Surovikin, who was loved by Russian soldiers for his attacks, suddenly became the most talked about name in Russia. However, this situation started to make Putin very uneasy. Thus, Sergei Surovikin took the first place in the list of people who could carry out a coup. These allegations are thought to be the reason why Vladimir Putin dismissed Sergei Surovikin. However, nothing has been proven yet. Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky has appealed to the International Criminal Court to put Putin on trial for a number of reasons with the decision of the criminal court last month. Vladimir Putin's arrest was ordered. Vladimir Putin's attempts to forcibly send Ukrainian citizens on Ukrainian territory to Russia led to Putin's prosecution. As it is known, many Russian officials were sent by Putin to the territory of Ukraine, where Ukrainian citizens were issued Russian passports. Ukrainian citizens who did not want to go over forcibly taken into Russia by Russian soldiers. For this reason, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin. The Russian army has been occupying Ukrainian territory for 16 months, while the whole world is waiting for the war between Russia and Ukraine to end. The intensity of the war is growing day by day. However, this time the war has started to move in favor of Ukraine. Recently, pro-Ukrainian Russian Freedom Legion soldiers captured a city within the borders of Russia for the first time. The Ukrainian army has previously carried out airstrikes inside Russian borders, but this was the first time that a ground operation entered Russian territory. The city of Belgorod, located on the Ukrainian border of Russia, is known as the coordination center of the Russian army. Pro-Ukrainian Russian Freedom Legion soldiers entered the Belgorod borders and managed to capture two border towns in this region. The Belgorod regional governor officially confirmed that fighting is still ongoing and the Ukrainian army has captured the two towns. The commander of the Russian Freedom Legion said in a statement that they will continue to carry out these attacks in order to liberate Russia from Putin's regime and to liberate Russia once again. There were intense clashes over the weekend. Although the Russian troops attacked after a long time, they were unable to break through the steel wall of the Ukrainian defense troops and continued to suffer huge losses. The southern offensive of the Ukrainian army continues from where it left off. A powerful explosion occurred near the Melitopol airport over the weekend. Residents of the city and the neighboring settlements in the Zaporizhia region reported a powerful explosion in the area of the Melitopol airport. Actually, there were two explosions, one in the air at an altitude of several hundred meters, and was the result of the work of Russian air defense systems. But the second was less powerful than the other. One person died during the explosion on the ground. Both explosions can be seen in the video recorded by a security camera literally a few seconds before the first explosion. It seems that the anti-aircraft missile was launched, which was fired at the target but did not hit it. A few minutes later, however, a similar explosion occurs on the ground. At the same time, it is unknown whether the explosion was the result of a second missile collision or if the wreckage of the fired anti-aircraft missile fell and exploded. According to official figures, at least one person died in the attack. The Ukrainian army confirmed that it had successfully attacked the Melitopol airport, but the Russian side preferred to deny this, claiming that their air defense systems work successfully. On the other hand, Ukrainian air defense forces shot down 9 Russian cruise missiles from the air over the Dnipropetrovsk region. Serhiy Lysyk, head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, says that 9 cruise missiles were shot down over the region. The Prosecutor General's office reported that 2 people were injured as a result of an airstrike targeting critical infrastructure in the Dnipropetrovsk region on Friday. According to the investigation, Russian soldiers, in defiance of international humanitarian law norms, launched a missile attack on one of the energy facilities in the Kryvyi Rih area in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Under the procedural guidance of the local prosecutor's office, a pre-trial investigation was launched into violations of the laws and customs of war. Prosecutors, investigators, and experts are working at the scene and recording evidence of yet another crime committed by Russian forces. Serial Isaac stated that over the weekend, a 46-year-old factory worker was injured in an attack targeting an energy infrastructure in Russia's Kryvyi Rih region. The Russians launched a massive missile attack on Ukraine's critical infrastructure and fired 71 cruise missiles, 61 of which were shot down. The Russians also tried to attack the Dnipropetrovsk region with kamikaze UAVs. Mykola Lukashuk, chairman of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Council, said "Shah drones again. Guardians of the sky are on the defensive. Be careful. Take care of yourself." Air defense systems in the area have been confirmed to be working, but it's not yet clear how many kamikaze UAVs have been destroyed. We have previously conveyed to you that Russia's kamikaze UAV exports ceased after the US sanctions against Iran. Recently, it was customary for Russia to launch kamikaze drone attacks alongside missile attacks. Recently, these kamikaze drone attacks have come to a standstill. The information from the Kremlin is the Russia has a limited number of kamikaze drones, and they are waiting for the right moment to use them. On the other hand, Ukraine's anti-aircraft defense unit shot down 10 Russian missiles over the city of Kiev. Civilians remained unharmed. The mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, said, according to the data of the air defense forces, 10 missiles were shot down in the skies of Kiev. No casualties were reported. Some power grids were damaged. Repair teams are already working to restore power supply services. In addition, the Ukrainian border guards shot down a Russian attack aircraft over Bakhmut over the weekend. Fighters of the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine reduced the aircraft fleet of the Russian occupation forces by 1 combat vehicle. This was the second confirmed jet destroyed by the Manpads team of the border guards. The State Border Guard Service states that it is possible to shoot down an Su-25 attack aircraft from a foreign-made portable anti-aircraft missile system. The plane rose in smoke and began to fall after being hit by a Manpads missile. The plane burst into flames after hitting the ground. Ukrainian defenders saw flames and clouds of black smoke. Presumably the pilot was killed in the attack. Ukrainian defenders did not see it launched. According to an update released by the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Russia has lost more than a dozen tanks and armored vehicles in Ukraine. In recent days, the Ukrainian General Staff reported that Moscow forces lost 13 tanks, 14 armored vehicles, and a plane. He said Ukrainian forces shot down 2 single-seat twin-engine Russian Su-25 aircraft from the Soviet era. The defense ministry said Russian forces had abandoned armored vehicles near the Donetsk town of Boulder, which has seen intense fighting in recent weeks. After the UK Ministry of Defence resumed an offensive at the western end of Vologda late last month, inexperienced units sent by Russia's military command suffered particularly heavy losses. The UK Defence Ministry says that Russian troops abandoned and fled probably at least 30 mostly intact armored vehicles in a single incident following a failed attack. Russian ultra-nationalist blogger Igor Girkin said that more than 30 units of armored vehicles were lost in the attacks on Volodar.